Next, we'll be covering how to create an election in SimpleVote from start to finish. To start, you can create either a new election or create an election from a template. You can explore the templates, but more on that later. For now, let's assume that you're creating an election from scratch. You'll click on Create a New Election, and you'll be taken to the three-step wizard. First, you give the election details, then the ballot details, and lastly, you upload your voters. The election details include the name and the election overview. Both of these will be public. So this is the title, which will appear at the top of the ballot, and then the election information will appear in the information area of your election. You can also set a start date and an end date. When the start date and time come to pass, the election will be open, the emails will be sent out to all of the voters that you've uploaded, and voters will be able to cast their ballots. When the end date comes to pass, voters will no longer be able to cast their ballots, and the election will be closed. It's not possible to reopen an election, whether you closed it manually or whether it was closed because the end date has passed. So make sure that you don't set it at the incorrect time, otherwise you will have to rerun your election. Let's fill this information out and continue. Once you've filled out your details, keep in mind that this is what voters will see once they click on information about the election. You can continue to the ballots. Each election can contain as many ballots as you like. So for example, you could have an election for a particular category of candidate or representative or something of that kind, and then you could elect a series of different representatives based on certain criteria. It's entirely up to you. You could also use it for a decision, a motion, so perhaps each ballot could be a different motion, etc. I'll fill out some ballots for you to see. For now, you just have to fill in the ballot title, how many seats you need to fill, that's the number of winners. So for example, if you wanted to choose 2 decisions out of a range of decisions or 2 candidates out of a range of candidates. And you also choose your voting method. That can be Scottish STV, which is a form of ranked choice voting, first past the post, which is just the most popular candidate, where each voter only gets one vote, or approval voting, where voters can vote for as many candidates as they like, and the most popular candidate or choice wins. I'll fill out a few demo ballots so that you can see what they look like. So I've just created here an election. I've called it Best Science TV or Internet Presenter of All Time. I've added some information here. You can add any kind of information. I would suggest a bit of background on the election, especially if your voters might receive the election email without having first been given an explanation that the election is being held. And also maybe something about the voting method. There is some information. It will say ranked choice, and the interface is quite intuitive to lead people to rank as many candidates as possible, which is always preferable. However, if your voters are not familiar with the concept of ranked choice voting, you can give a little explanation of what that is. Once you save your information, you can then add as many candidates as you like. Just type in the name and click Add Candidate. Later, I'll also be showcasing the self-nomination process. So for now, I'll leave one of these blank, which is helpful because it will allow you to see what it looks like, where instead of you adding all of the candidates and the information about those candidates, you instead just add the information about the ballot, like I've added here, and then you leave candidates to nominate themselves, where you can then approve or reject them. As you can see, you can also use other voting methods other than ranked choice. So for example, you could ask a question of your voters. This could be a formal motion, which might be binding on your organization, or it could be something more consultative. In this case, simply the option that is most voted will win. In this case, 1 seat to fill means that only yes or no can win. And these are treated like candidates. So if you wanted to add, let's say you've got a yes camp and a no camp on a question, you could add, for example, information supporting a yes decision or information supporting a no decision, which would show in the same place as a candidate statement. For approval voting, this is more for things like more uncontroversial survey questions. A classic example is a group of friends picking a restaurant to go to, where the objective is just to pick a solution that everybody is happy with. In this case, I've just filled it out with a few options of, potentially what the favorite thing might be. For this, most people would just use a survey. However, it can be helpful to include it alongside another election. So having an election where you've got some important ballots, but then you also just want some consultative information, can be helpful. For example, let's say your organization is picking a new name and you have maybe 5 or 10 different names that you want to choose from and you want to put it to a vote. This allows you to, rather than rank choices, it just allows to pick a selection which everybody likes. Once you're done with all of this and you've added as many ballots as you like, you can then continue to the voter upload. You're almost ready to open your election, but first you have to add the voters that will be able to vote. There's two ways of doing this. You can either enter voters manually or you can upload them from a spreadsheet. There's also a third method. If you're on a pro or enterprise plan, you'll be able to see registers that you previously uploaded. So if you've previously uploaded a spreadsheet, SimpleVote will allow you to keep them for up to 30 days to reuse them in future elections. I'll just fill out some information and upload a sample list so that you can see what this looks like. I've now added a couple of manual voters and I've also uploaded a dummy list with 50 names and emails. At this point, you have to make sure that you tick this box confirming that you have permission to send election-related emails such as the ballot links, the reminders, and the result. This is important because SimpleVote only processes data on your instruction. So we are not the data controller and we won't read your your voter names or email addresses. You're responsible for managing this, so you have to make sure that you have consent under GDPR. For example, this could be people who are members of your organization. Once you've ticked this, you can confirm your voters. You'll notice that it has added both our manually added voters and our uploaded voters, so you can have a mix of these two. Once you confirm your voters, it will register them and take you here. Now, as we scheduled the election earlier, it will show the time at which it will open. You can also open voting immediately if you want to open it before this date and time. You can go back and edit the time at which it will open. And if you haven't set a schedule, you'll just have to open voting manually and you'll just see this as a draft. This is the election details page. You can see quite a lot of information on here, but more on that in the next video.